All right, so now I just went through talking about how the LaRue will work with the Atrius. This is a Geissele, this is an SSA-E that I have in here. This is the Geissele, or I'm sorry, the Atrius G lever, and it came with, if you can see right here, this piece, this is the lever blocker. It sits underneath the trigger hammer springs underneath that. And then you've got I'm sorry, not trigger hammer springs, underneath the trigger springs, underneath that pin, sorry. And it just basically is a piece that stands up. And as you can see, it prevents the lever from going further forward because there's no stop here like in a LaRue. It could potentially go underneath the hammer, get stuck under the hammer. So this lever stopper is necessary for Geissele triggers because they have that kind of standard, well, I don't know that it's necessary, but functionally it's necessary because it has that same kind of mil-spec trigger tail. But it does not have, if I've got, let's see if I have a mil-spec hammer lying around. Here we go. This is at least, yeah, this is a mil-spec hammer. So unlike a mil-spec hammer like this that has this extended tail here, this will prevent the lever from ever going underneath it. It can never go up underneath a mil-spec hammer tail. Again, unless you have modified it and shaved all this off to simulate a hammer like a Geissele. But with the Geissele hammer, it could go underneath it. So the big advantage I think here is the lever blocker. I've actually tested with a separate super selector and all functions work. Safe, semi, and forced reset, they all work. So this is not about showing whether or not you need the lever. You absolutely do. I don't believe you actually need the Geissele, like the G lever, for, like I said, the reasons that I explained. In fact, I'm going to need to go and do some modifications here, I think, to my trigger tail on my SSA-E, which I'm not super thrilled about because while I'm getting dry fire work to work here, I've had some oddities actually firing this with my upper. And I thought it could be that it's the bolt. Like maybe I have a bolt that's just slightly out of spec. I was using a CAC K-spec down vent bolt, which I've got a ton of them and they've worked fine in other uppers, but I thought, maybe there's just something a little bit different. Like this is a PSA billet lower and upper receiver pair. Like maybe the dimensions are somewhere off or I don't know. But I've tried it with a microbest mil-spec bolt, same thing. Like the trigger pull is just a little bit heavier. And I say a little bit heavier, like the second stage is a lot heavier with the upper on trying to go through this process than it is, and I'm trying not to block the camera here. It's a lot heavier. Let's see if we can get this here better. Sorry, I have a F level camera work, but the trigger pull is heavier with the upper on than it is with the lower. So here I've got I'll try to shut up so you can hear, like, here I'm about to go to the first stage, hit the wall, and then I'll go to second stage, and you can see how it works. There's not much, like a reset. So there's my take up. Very little additional pressure required there. Actually, it looks like that locked up. Oh, there we go. See, it's binding here. Oh, my lever went down. It's binding here in semi, but like when our lever's in the right spot where it's supposed to be, very light. I think it's 2 pounds, I believe, is the second stage. So I think what's happening is you can see the lever, I think it's just getting pushed slightly forward, and then that is causing more force to be required to overcome that, or something. Something is just off there. It's like I'm having to push through my trigger pull. It's like I'm having to push this lever back because, as you can see here, I've got it. When I pull the trigger hard, I'm manually holding this lever forward. It's not going to go because it can't clear. So I think what I'm having to do is the trigger is having to push this lever back and overcome it. And I don't know, again, if you listen to Atrius, and obviously they know what they're doing, but like they say that there's some tolerance differences. So like it could be just my lever, or reality is it's probably the tolerance stacking of like this lower and like where the holes, like the safety hole lines up versus where my trigger is actually lining up versus the width or the height of the trigger tail, and then like the actual geometry on the G lever. It could just be that everything is just slightly off and just enough that it's not that it's unusable. Even with my upper on, it'll normally work, but it's like that trigger pull is just, sometimes like when you don't have that upper, like it reset, it's hard to describe. It's like that first shot. If you go into forced reset, it's totally fine and it's like a super light trigger pull. But if you don't go through that first and then go to semi, and you just try to go semi straight, which is, you know, how you'd simulate it if you, God forbid, needed your rifle or pistol, you know, in the middle of the night, you have that first shot. That first trigger pull is like damn near impossible to overcome, it feels like. I'm talking about, like, no exaggeration, feels like a 15 plus pound trigger pull. Like you're just sitting there like, God, is this thing, is it dead? And you just squeeze the hell out of it and it'll eventually fire. But you know, that's obviously suboptimal. So I think I'm gonna take a look at this. I'm probably going to Dremel down the tail just slightly and see if that solves my woes here. And I'll report back.